This summer with Hulu on Disney Plus, a shocking crime changes everything with Star Wars: The Acolyte on Disney Plus.
Last night, a Jedi was murdered.
On Hulu, it's season 3 of the Emmy Award-winning series The Bear.
We're open.
Doors!
A new mystery kicks off season 4 of Only Murders in the Building, and the sci-fi laughs continue on a new season of Futurama. We're back, baby! All of these and more streaming this summer. Available with Disney Bundle plans starting at $9.99 a month. Terms apply. Visit DisneyPlus.com/Hulu for details. This summer with Hulu on Disney Plus, a shocking crime changes everything with Star Wars: The Acolyte on Disney Plus.
Last night, a Jedi was murdered.
On Hulu, it's season 3 of the Emmy Award-winning series The Bear.
We're open.
Doors!
A new mystery kicks off season 4 of Only Murders in the Building, and the sci-fi laughs continue on a new season of Futurama. We're back, baby! All of these and more streaming this summer. Available with Disney Bundle plans starting at $9.99 a month. Terms apply. Visit DisneyPlus.com/Hulu for details.
Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
Welcome in, you beautiful people. It's Friday, June 14th on the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I am joined, as always, by Matthew Tank Top Betz.
I am wearing a tank top, just for the audio listeners that would like to visualize that. It's hot, man. It's the hottest, best ball summer I think that we've had in forever. I mean, contests are opening on Underdog and closing within 48 hours.
Correct.
Absolute sick people out there. I'm getting ready to do some yard work after we record this show. So, I got the tank on, get ready to go out, throw something in my headphones and just enjoy the dad life, man. So summer's here. It's been a fun summer so far. I've really enjoyed the work-life balance before things get absolutely crazy in my household come August when number 3 arrives. But it's best ball summer, man.
I think you've inspired me because after this podcast, I will be going to my son's swim meet and I have to do some stuff setting up beforehand. But I think I'm going to go tank top. I think that's, what the people
Flex
there
on 'em.
want to. Yeah, they want to see that. So I figured that I would just go right into it. But yeah,
Are you
summer,
sure about that?
I'll poll them. I'll wear it and say, hey, what do you think? Am I pulling this off?
Yes,
And,
no, maybe so. What do you think here? Everyone just turns away. I can't even look at that.
Yeah, it's a chance for me to make friends. That's what I hear. But yeah, summer's been good to us as well, man. We were just talking about the boys. It's oh man, every single day it's pool time. It's pool time after that, and then we go back to the pool. So good stuff here. Middle of June, we're still talking best ball, and we will be talking about best ball for a while. I saw someone the other day. They were asking, "Hey, why don't the ballers talk more about best ball? Why don't they do best ball drafts on the main show?" It's well, our DFS and betting show is purely devoted to best ball for the entire summer, our rankings, everything else. So you get your fix here. You can get your fix on our Discord channel. I mean, I saw some conversation today, back and forth, and some of the questions we'll have on today's show are straight from our Ballers Discord. So make sure you get in on that, ballersdiscord.com, ultimatedraftkit.com. You and I still have some stuff coming out. You just put out a giant article about ACL research, something I know nothing of, but I will take your word for it. But that is a lengthy article that is only for people in the Ultimate Draft Kit Plus, and that's something we're going to continue to do. If you get it, you get to be on this premium content. I am working on a dare I say, monster article in the shadows that I haven't even told Betz what it is yet.
You have not. I asked, and you didn't even answer. You just sent the word count, and you said I'm about a third of the way through, and it was 9,000 words. So when this article comes out, get ready to put in a time off request for your current job, because you're going to need some time off to actually finish reading this thing. So yeah, I'm excited to check it out, Kyle. And corporate's going to be like, hey, Betz, why isn't your work done today? Well, I'm sorry, I had to read Kyle's article. It took 4 days. That's just what it is.
Yeah, I think my longest reading time, because the estimate it's about 200 words per minute is kind of the average rate of a lot of sites. So I think my longest has been 49 minutes. So I think this one's going to be a 2-day.
Oh boy.
2-day. It's more of like, let's make sure that we know everything we need to know going into the season. I've been looking at every single team, their coverages. I feel like on this show specifically, you and I kind of get into the nitty gritty, like deep stuff. And spoiler alert, next week on the Dynasty podcast, you and I are going to be giving our biggest football guy takes, like hand in the dirt. You and I, not just talking numbers and Dynasty, but like, okay, this is what we think is going to happen. So a real man's man episode on the Dynasty show this next week.
Oh, for sure, dude. The highest of tea conversations. I'm actually glad that you pointed that out on this show, because I think the conversation will be very helpful for not just, like the Dynasty lens, but also like redraft and best ball specific, maybe some betting nuggets and that kind of thing. But yeah, looking at like the biggest coaching changes as far as scheme and pace of play changes, and like Kyle said, just all those things. So yeah, check it out on the Dynasty podcast next week.
Yeah, and the women listening right now are just like, you guys are turds. You guys are just talking about, what it means to be a man. Like, there are some women, especially the women that write for us, are like, I know more than you. So yeah, it's going to be a jam-packed episode next week. This one, we have some best ball concepts that I'm really excited to dive into, especially with running backs. We talked a lot last week of when you're stacking, what does it look like to have a running back? This week, one of the questions that I've seen, and we did some data and research, is what do you do with a backfield if you like both options, if you like both the running backs? Last year, if you would have had Mostert and Achane, if you would have picked them, you would have smashed. Same thing with the Lions. If you took Gibbs in the 3rd round and Montgomery in the 8th, and you just said, I want this backfield, it can work. So we'll talk about some of that strategy. But before we get started, I wanted to break down a roster. A lot of times I see people post their rosters. They give some thoughts. We give some thoughts in our Discord channel. But us being such good friends, really, really good guys to each other, I thought this would be a chance to reveal our rosters and then just totally roast each other about what were you thinking. So, Betz, why don't you go first so I can just demean your roster? You are through 11 rounds. You've just chosen a random team that you're in. You can share the tournament if you want. But tell me what you're working with so far.
Yeah, this is the Best Ball Mania slow draft. And by the way, I love fast drafts. Like, that's my preferred way to attack these tournaments, because I feel like I'm better at those than slow draft, but just life circumstances currently, like I kind of have to be in slow draft mode right now. So it's been an adjustment for me this summer, but the team currently through 11 rounds, I've got Dak at quarterback. He's my only one so far. It's Dave Montgomery, Trey Benson, Blake Corum, and Ezekiel Elliott on this team, which, what are we doing? CeeDee Lamb, Devonta Smith, DK Metcalf, Christian Kirk, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. And of course, imagine not having Mark Andrews. So I went elite tight end, and this is a 0 RB build.
Did you already put in the Venmo request from Underdog to just send you the winnings? Is that what you would?
Yeah,
okay.
Don't even bother playing out the season. Don't sim it. Just send it over. It's locked and loaded.
Yeah, 11 rounds through, it's clear. You went wide receiver heavy early. You got Christian Kirk because, well, you always end up getting him, and Mark Andrews. So your first running back was not selected until pick 72, Dave Montgomery. And I cannot pick apart Dave Montgomery because the roster that I'm about to share, I picked him too. And I think Dave Montgomery is one of my highest exposure running backs that you can get when you think about touchdown equity. A Dallas stack, I can't argue against that at all. Mark Andrews, I can't argue against that at all. At running back, I know you're going for this, kind of approach where it's like, oh, I don't need that testosterone in my life. I've got a couple rookies. They're going to get stronger over time. And then I see Ezekiel Elliott. And I have to ask myself, Betz, do you care at all about anyone on this planet?
What's wild is, and like when I click the button on Zeke, I like feel ill. Like I'm like, this is so gross. But man, I don't like the way that they talk about this backfield, and talk and actions are very different, but it's the middle of June and they really haven't added to the backfield at all. As we get closer to camp, like someone's going to get cut that you're like, I didn't see that coming. And maybe that's a guy that lands in Dallas, but like as it stands, I'm fine taking shots on both these guys while the cost is low. If Zeke was like a round 8 pick, it'd be like, I'm going to take 0 of him and hope for the best. But man, when he goes like around pick 130 and Dowdle goes around pick 140, I've taken some teams where like I just take both those guys and I'm like, I think the offense is going to be great. I don't know which guy it's going to be, but I'll take shots, either on the same team or just across my portfolio and kind of hope Zeke, Jamal Williams of 2 years ago falls into the end zone 12 times and you're like, okay, that worked out. So as long as they're cheap, I'm fine with the Dallas backfield.
Yeah, Zeke last year, if you forgot when he was a Patriot, it was tons of volume down the stretch, tons of inefficiency. He was 3.0 yards per carry over those final 6 weeks, but he was also the RB9 from just pure opportunities and falling into the end zone a couple of times. And he got some receptions. So I get it on this backfield where he's cheap. Like, it'd be different if Zeke was a top 100 pick and you're kind of saying he is the guy. Now, you could look back and just say this guy's dead by week 10 and he doesn't have it, or he's off the roster, whatever else it is. So let me ask you moving forward for this team, and then you can go to mine. You have a Dallas stack here. Are you interested in adding any more Dallas players to it?
So the only player currently that would be available to me, because I just looked before we started, Brandon Cooks is off the board. So basically if I'm going to add another piece on here, it's probably going to be Jalen Tolbert. But man, does that feel terrible. And I have this deep feeling of I know this won't work out. Just what in his profile says that he's got the talent or that he's going to be good or that a year 3 breakout is coming. Nothing. But the depth chart currently, and this is where you get into a lot of trouble with wide receivers, the depth chart currently is obviously CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, who, he got touchdowns last year. I think he had 8 receiving touchdowns. So he worked out for fantasy relative to, low expectations, but his per route numbers were quite terrible. And then Jalen Tolbert was also quite terrible, but they let Michael Gallup go. There really is not a wide receiver 3 of note on the roster, which is why a lot of people are into Jake Ferguson, myself included. But yeah, I think maybe a dart in round 16, 17 on Jalen Tolbert, but I'm not going to lie, I don't really feel great about it.
Betz, I'm your friend. And I know I said earlier I came here to roast you, but I'm also such a good friend that I don't want you to do dumb things. So I just sent you through 2 years what Jalen Tolbert has done in the NFL. Okay. Yards per out run, he's one of the boys. And by one of the boys, he's under 1. The under 1 boys, if you are under 1 yards per out run through 2 years, you are basically done. And I mean, the list is really, really bad. There's only one man to survive this. It's been Devontae Adams, who had a crazy career. And then Zay Jones did as well. I mean, Adams was right at 1.00 through 2 years. Zay Jones is at 0.96. Terrace Marshall, we don't really need to talk about him. He's right above it, but yeah, Tolbert, don't do it, man.
It's not good. It's not good, man. And this is the exact kind of guy where it's in round 17, 18, whatever, fine. But this is a guy, if we talk in this kind of this conversation in 2 months, it's August 15th. He's running with the ones as the third option. And all of a sudden he's a 13th round pick or a 12th round pick. It's dude, no way, I'm out.
Yeah, what I would do is only in this situation, Jalen Tolbert, I'd be okay, Dallas team, I've already bought in, might as well. But I'm not using him as a one-off. Nope. As maybe, yeah, don't do that. I also am assuming you're going after a Seattle stack here with DK and JSN.
Potentially. Yeah, I think Gino's, a guy that I struggle with. I'm not super excited about him specifically this year, but you look at kind of where the wide receivers go, where the running backs go, generally when multiple players go early, it's kind of a signal that the offense should be, above average, top 15, top 16 in the league. And if that's the case, Gino's probably going to give you enough spike weeks to help supplement your roster as a QB2 or a QB3, depending on your build. So I'm fine with him, but I don't see a true difference-making ceiling for a guy like that at this point in his career. So Seattle, I took both Metcalf, I took JSN. I'm fine to say, look, I've stacked that offense with or without Gino, one way or the other. But the way that my build is currently setting up, it is probably either going to be Gino. I do have Lawrence in the queue. We'll see if he falls with the Christian Kirk team here, but I doubt it. But if not, it's Gino or it's one of these gross stacks with Drake May or Bo Nix or someone like that, and you're just oh, good Lord.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to read off mine, and the goal of this is to kind of give you our thought process of different parts of the draft. You can do this with your friends. You can do this on Discord and kind of share. So I'm through 15 rounds. This is one of the slow drafts for the Hound Dog, which I'll talk about that tournament later. It was kind of a short-lived one, but it was a 5-entry max and it was a $6 entry. So, we'll talk about contest selection, but one of the things that I think Underdog has been good at is kind of time boxing certain contests. And so I put dates next to them. A lot of people do. This is drafts that occurred at the beginning of June. And I can look back later and say, okay, that tournament was a beginning of June tournament. And I cannot compare the outcome of that one to an August tournament because everybody was drafting in the beginning of June. So through 15 rounds, my quarterbacks are Joe Burrow and Deshaun Watson. My running backs are Isaiah Pacheco, David Montgomery, Jalen Warren. Don't know if you've heard of him in the 0 RB targets. Chase Brown and Chuba Hubbard. And then at wide receiver, I went heavy early. So Jamar Chase and T. Higgins were two of the wide receivers. So I got the Burrow stack. Deebo Samuel, Devonta Smith, and then Jerry Jeudy and Quentin Johnston later. And my tight ends are Njoku and Freiermuth. So far, I have a pretty nice sized Bengals stack with Burrow, Chase Brown, Chase, and T. Higgins, and then a Cleveland stack with Deshaun Watson, Jerry Jeudy, and David Njoku. So that Cleveland stack was kind of like a backdoor one. Yeah,
and that's actually what we talked about last week. I'm a fan of the Cleveland backdoor stack if it works. Now, are you aware that you also have a mini Pittsburgh stack going on here, Kyle? Because you and Arthur Smith, I know last year, were not on the best terms down in Atlanta, but you have two Pittsburgh Steelers, so what could go wrong?
I realize that, and he throws the tight end. I mean, I could give you a lot of propaganda with this across the board, and also part of me was trying to say I'm getting some divisional matchups here in the AFC North.
Yeah, totally. I like this team for the way it's built. Like you get the Burrow alpha stack, and you're saying I'm all in on the Bengals this year, and we talked about this last week. And whenever we do stuff like this and we talk about it, I always try to implement that strategy in my next several drafts, which is really funny. But you and I both stacked our running back with the team that we're betting on and saying, look, if the Bengals are good, there's a good chance one of these running backs produces meaningful points for fantasy, whether it's Zach Moss or Chase Brown, we don't know, but you're making a bet based off ADP and kind of where you got him. So I love him as, a running back 4 for this roster. I will say the ancillary wide receivers to me, I mean, I get Jeudy because you're with Watson and you're stacking the Browns, but like the profile of these two guys, Jerry Jeudy and Quentin Johnston, oh baby. I mean, we're talking about some potential big time disappointments. And Jeudy, by the way, is dealing with a little bit of a minor injury in minicamp right now. So we'll see on his health as we go by. But I feel like I personally would have been taking more upside swings with like the Quentin Johnston range of like, give me the unknown. Like, give me Jalen Polk over Quentin Johnston. Give me just someone else that goes there that I don't know if he's going to be good, but like we're pretty sure Quentin Johnston will not be what we thought he could be coming out. Could he still produce wide receiver 3 numbers? In theory, sure. But like the bet is quite bad now after what we have from year 1. So I personally would have been saying, give me a rookie that like, I don't know, but the upside is much higher.
I don't know, Betz. His player note on Underdog said he's primed for a big breakout. And we know that's how we all make decisions when we look at who we're going to draft. We see what is the latest note. If you're playing on Sleeper or whatever else. I joke about that, but I have so many friends in my leagues. It's like, dude, have you seen this note, this blurb that someone wrote? And
we call that vibes-based drafting, Kyle. What's the latest vibes on this guy? I don't know, man. I saw a highlight in shorts the other day. Okay, we're in.
It's crazy how subtle those things are. You scrolled across your timeline, you remembered one thing from one video, like you said, and it stays with you. And you think about a player, and it actually triggers you. Probably have to figure out some type of like psychological research-based article one day to figure that out, because it really does play a part of it. So any advice for me through 15 rounds of how you'd finish this draft, because I have 3 more to go?
So my question for you and this team, it's Njoku and Freiermuth at tight end. Are you planning to go with making the bet that Njoku is an elite tight end this year, or are you planning for a 3 tight end build?
I'm probably just going to stay with 2.
Like it. I mean, I feel stuck on Njoku because the splits, like we talked about him last week a little bit, but like his splits without Watson were incredible. Like Joe Flacco for president. But with Watson, they were meh, but his per route numbers were awesome. So yeah, I think that's totally fair if you're betting on him. And he does, he's a top 100 pick. So it's like, you probably should make that bet anyway.
Yeah, I think that with the way that I have this team, usually I would say, I'm doing 2 or 3 at the onesie positions at quarterback and tight end, but I feel pretty confident in just saying the way that I built this team with the stacks is I'm going to have 2 quarterbacks, I'm going to stay with 2 tight ends, and then I can kind of build out the room with even more shots at wide receiver and running back. Now, I don't want dead spots, but I do recognize where I'm playing, which is June, and a lot of people are guessing on who's the starter or who's going to even make the roster in certain places. So I don't really feel the need, because I'm assuming that part of my room is going to be drafting people that just are dead spots.
Yeah.
So I'm not really worried about making up that third tight end spot.
Are you going to tack on a Bronco for week 17?
That was the only thing that I was thinking about. Is I thought about Greg D if I was going to get a third tight end because of the correlation with week 17. I don't know. I mean, I'll have to check and see. I think Mims is already off the board, so who knows, man. McLaughlin would be Reynolds, fun. Man. Yeah, McLaughlin's somebody that I actually would like to add to this roster, but I think he's also gone. So you can do that with any of your friends, kind of work through it and ask the thought process. And I have a couple friends that, every once in a while we'll just hop in a draft together. We'll kind of sit and have a drink and kind of be like, hey, what's your thought process here? What are you looking for? And it's a fun place to dissect a draft and to talk strategy. So let's take a quick break and we'll talk about some mailbag questions.
Allstate wants to remind fans that mayhem is everywhere. Like when your fantasy league meets up at your house. Everything's great until the hot plate gets too hot for the tablecloth. Now your kitchen's up in smoke. And if you don't have the right home insurance coverage, the cost to fix this is anything but a fantasy. So switch to Allstate, save money, and get protected from mayhem like this. Not available in every state based on coverage selected, subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Savings vary.
With half-price appetizers, late night at Applebee's is for the second shifters. Working hard-ish and partying harder. The parents, who found a sitter they kind of trust a little and ran with it. And old friends sharing new stories over scrumptious shareables. For half the price. Late night at Applebee's is for every crew, squad, group of homies, or loose acquaintances who know that half-price appetizers are way more fun. But they won't last forever, so hurry in.
Limited time. Selection, price, and participation may vary by restaurant location. Valid for dine-in orders and online via Applebee's.com or the mobile app.
Betz and I are going to talk through a number of different topics, some questions that were submitted on Discord. And instead of hitting the standard mailbag drop, which doesn't require us to say mailbag, I'm going to hit the best ball drop because there's a certain point where I can't hit this anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Best ball bonanza.
I hit that drop every single week in the summer. And then there comes a time where it's just gone and we have to go into DFS drops. So I just figured let's just keep riding this thing all throughout the summer. You with me?
Might as well.
All right, first question is a question about DraftKings versus Underdog and just the differences between those two. One of them comes from IGW. How should our strategies differ between the two? There's quite a bit of difference between the two. Do we alter our strategies? You touched on this a couple of times. And how are running backs valued differently, knowing on DraftKings it's full PPR? And I'll let you lead this question. You play a ton more on DraftKings compared to me.
Yeah, I think there's a couple big points with the way DraftKings format is compared to Underdog. At the top, like the highest level conversation, I think a lot of people, you'll hear them say, Underdog is a lot more sharp. DraftKings, there's maybe some more casuals. And I think that is largely true. On Underdog, like there's so much content around Underdog specifically right now in the fantasy football space, which is great for our game and for, what we love to do. But it does invite, just better drafters that you're going against. On Underdog, you'll see a lot of sharp drafters. On DraftKings, you will see a little bit more casuals. As far as the actual players themselves are concerned, it's full PPR plus the bonuses compared to half PPR. One thing about that is that quarterback scoring is actually a little bit more flat. Now, the elites will still separate to some degree, but they can separate less because a pocket passer has access to that 300-yard bonus. That's 3 points right there to your score in a week. And, the number of players that could do that for you, obviously, depending on the week, there's 10, 12 guys that could give you that outcome. I mean, Derek Carr, I think, led the league in 300-yard passing games last year. And you don't think about Derek Carr as like a high upside type of guy. Whereas in your lineup on Underdog, those elite quarterback scorers, like the guys that can actually give you 25, sometimes 30 points, they're few and far between. So I think about it kind of in a DFS landscape. Like on FanDuel, we're like, let's spend up for an elite quarterback because the rushing ability and all those things can get you there. But it's not quite as evident on DraftKings. So that's one more thing. Like I'm more willing to be going for a 3 quarterback build on DK sometimes than I am on Underdog because of the scoring format with 300-yard bonuses. For wide receivers, the landscape isn't as crazy for like wide receiver thirst when you think about ADP and where guys go. But just think about the scoring, right? Like full PPR. I mean, I always want 4 wide receivers in my lineup. You got to start 3. I want that flex to be a wide receiver. So I am almost exclusively drafting 0 RB teams over there, with the exception of like, yes, I want Bijan. Yes, I want Brees. I want the elite guys. But man, when I get into like round 2, round 3, round 4, I want to be the guy showing up with Tank Dell and, the great options that are there, and have someone else try to beat me with Jameson Williams or, someone else later. Like, I think you really need elite wide receivers on DK if you're going to have, stop Kyle, if you're going to have a truly good season best ball wise for those wide receivers.
You just took a shot at Jameson Williams as we were going right by. You did have a draft you showed me the other day, and I said, there's no way this is real, because, there are certain draft rooms. Every draft room is different, right? You have 12 people. It could be anybody. But you started off with a build where it was Jamar Chase in the first, Drake London the second, and my boy Chris Olave fell to the third. Are you just stealing people's money there? Like, is that why you've been telling me like, hey, Kyle, don't worry about it. I'll just take over DK?
Basically. Yeah, the thing about Underdog and DraftKings is that DraftKings uses the questionable tag pretty easily. Like they're not afraid to throw it on there. Chris Olave, for example, as of our recording, has a Q tag on DK. If you understand what happened, he had a very minor like shoulder incident in the weight room, which shout out to our boy Chris. I mean, he's grinding in the weight room. I mean, imagine
Love
not
it.
being.
Love
He's got that dog, Kyle, best shape of his life. But because of the Q tag, he fell into the third round, man. I was in one last night. Jameer Gibbs currently has a Q tag for a very minor thing going on in minicamp. He fell to like pick 19. So you will see people worried about the Q tag, and that could be an edge if you know when to attack it. Like if it's, I'm trying to think of a good example right now, but like if Juwan Johnson gets a Q tag because he just broke his foot, I don't know that I'm buying the injury dip there, right? But like a guy that's very minor, kind of planned rest days, so to speak, buy the dip on this one. and sometimes you can get some really, really fun teams that, quite frankly, you just will never get on Underdog.
Yeah, and just so you know, behind the scenes, like DraftKings, Underdog, we, love them both. DraftKings has been a sponsor. Underdog's been a sponsor for a long time too about best ball stuff. But like DraftKings really has wanted to improve their product. Like they understand this time of the year. We've talked to a couple of their guys. Ethan, shout out to Ethan. He's a fun guy. Eagles fan, right?
He is.
I think he's the Eagles. Yeah. They really have tried to improve their product, but there is a giant step. You'd think it would just be a 1-to-1. Like people play DFS on DraftKings. Why don't they play best ball? But the way the product is set up on Underdog is it's very user-friendly and it's very appealing and simple and clear. So there's a reason we don't talk about DraftKings as much with best ball. We could do 2 separate ranking systems, but we just play so much more on Underdog, and we found that our audience does as well. And you can apply pretty much 95% of what we're talking about to DraftKings. I mean, any format, right? Like people are always like, oh, my league is like 4 tight ends and 3 kickers. And why don't you talk about that on your show? It's like you can apply 95% of what we talk about and then use the context of your league. So would you say just, for yourself and creating rankings for Underdog, like they wouldn't be drastically different?
No, not a ton.
If you're doing DraftKings.
Just thinking about like player archetypes too, like I'm more willing to take someone like a Derrick Henry on Underdog where it's like, I just need touchdowns. Like even if he doesn't have a pass catching profile, my gosh, it's not a big deal, as big of a deal on Underdog. On DraftKings, it's like if he goes for 80 yards and no score, it's like, man, that's nothing, right? So you really need to think about player archetypes as well and kind of how they score. So it just changes a little bit in that way. But yes, I think largely the conversation is mostly the same.
All right, next question is from William, who been a long-time listener of the show, Lions fan. He asked this question, why exactly is Mike Gesicki, former Penn State great Mike Gesicki, going undrafted, his ADP is over 200, when Cincinnati has a long history of using their tight ends, Boyd and Mixon are gone, and Gesicki is actually talented. He's one of my higher rostered players at this point. Am I missing something? So we got to break this down because I think the point more is saying a player at the very end, you're taking around 18. Doesn't matter if you're really exposed to them or not. And then we can talk about Mike Gesicki, because for an 18th round pick, you have to spin a narrative and hope that they aren't a dead spot on your roster. So I think we can all do the narrative game with any player. I mean, I could really, you name a player, I could tell you the good case for it. I give you a stat for it. I could manipulate a stat to tell you, but are they going to be a dead roster spot? The thing about Gesicki is he's kind of always been that hybrid slot wide receiver tight end since coming out. And that's what he was so interesting, is when he tested way back when, what was that, like 2017, 2018, something like that. He was through the roof as a slot wide receiver tight end. And in the NFL, he's really only had like 1.5 seasons that were really significant. Most of them, you saw in Miami. 72% of his routes last year were in the slot. That was only behind Mark Andrews among tight ends. So can he be the slot tight end wide receiver for this team after Tyler Boyd is gone? Yes. If T. Higgins is dealt and, something changes there and he holds out and blah, 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 yes, that could work. However, the mounting evidence that he might not even be the most important tight end on this team, is it something to deal with? And the fact that, he hasn't been very good in a long time. So contract-wise, right, like, well, how much money is he getting? $400,000?
Yeah, his contract right now, it's a 1-year deal. I forget what it's the max up to, but he's only got $400K guaranteed. 2.5. He's on his, what is this, like his 4th team in 4 years, 3rd team in 3 years, something like that. So he's just, whenever that starts to happen, you have to ask yourself, like, what is going on with this player? I mean, you look at not even just his fantasy points per game, which has declined in 4 straight years. His yards per route run has dropped in 4 straight years. He ran just 19 routes per game last year, and that was on an offense in New England that, they had Hunter Henry as like the starting tight end, but like they didn't have the most elite group of pass catchers, right? Like in theory, he could have worked his way on the field as a slot. He was 31st out of 33 qualifying tight ends last year in fantasy points per route run. So like he was fun initially because he kind of did burst onto the scene for fantasy, but I think the reality, years later, as we're finding out, is like he doesn't actually fit an offense well. Like it's hard to make him fit, right? Like he doesn't play in line to be like your traditional starting tight end. And then he's not playing enough, or he's not good enough necessarily to be like a full-time slot wide receiver. So it really makes it a very, very thin bet. And, I think just not you and I, but we, when I say we, I mean the fantasy community, we've kind of been chasing like Joe Burrow's tight end for a couple of years now. Irv Smith got, a 4th chance in people's minds last year, and we saw how that worked out. So I don't think I've taken him once. But like you said, I mean, if the T. Higgins stuff lingers into August and September, like in theory, it could work, but I'm just not sure the talent is really there.
Yeah, since Joe Burrow became the starter in 2020, Bengals tight ends are 29th in fantasy points scored, 30th in tight end target percentage, only 14%. So they're not really getting the targets. And then I did a deep dive because the Bengals beat writers, I think, are some of the best out there. For ESPN, it's Ben Baby, which is really easy to remember and really fun to say, Ben Baby. Paul Dinner is for The Athletic, and Kelsey Conway, she used to be the Falcons. Like, these beat writers I know very, very well. They haven't really been talking about him that much. And they've kind of speculated, like there's an interview with him recently that was like, oh, I'm really excited to be a part of this offense. But the other tight ends on the team, they gave Drew Sample a ton of money to return and basically block for them. Tanner Hudson is annoying, but he actually earns targets.
Dude, Tanner Hudson's
in the
good.
slot. I know, he's a really fun player in preseason, and he's had some moments in like showdown stuff, but he was really good earning targets in the slot, 26% targets per route run. And even more so, they double tap tight end this year. Round 4, Eric All. Round 6, Tanner McLaughlin. They could also save $2 million if they cut Gesicki. So all of that to say, it just doesn't seem like a good bet to make him a high exposure guy.
For sure. And that's generally true of almost like every round 17, 18 guy. Like, this is not where I want to be taking stands right now, while we don't have all the information. But like,
correct.
If we get to August and we have a Kyren Williams-esque situation where it's like, oh baby, you need to be hammering this guy throughout the next 2 or 3 weeks, then yeah, like that's when you really want to just go all in. But right now, I am spreading out my exposure as much as possible with these round 17, 18 dart throws.
Yep, that's a good point. Like, you can wait on these kind of players because his ADP is not going to move.
Right.
He might move up to round 16 once you get to August if there's a drum beat. Next question is from Mimers7. What is your favorite roster construction? If you go 5 running backs, what round is ideal to have all of them? I have an article on the site. It's Best Ball Roster Construction. If you want that, it's pinned at the top of the primer. But I think for us, just the simple roster construction thing that we care about the most is I need 4 or 5 wide receivers through round 7 and 8. Like I need to make sure that I have those. And with running backs, I usually like to take one in that kind of 4th round, 3rd, 4th, 5th round spot. And so I'm ending up with a lot of ETN. I like Pacheco. I think he's fine where he goes. And getting guys in that range that then I can find later are 0 RB targets. So that's kind of my favorite way to build if I'm just looking at roster construction.
Yeah, and specifically to this question, if you are going to go with 5, like presumably you are taking at least 1, maybe 2 in the top, 8 rounds, 9 rounds, something like that, where it's like guys that you actually feel very confident in their role right away out of the gate. They're a starter. It's not like a true 0 RB build where you're like, I'm waiting until Zach Moss to be my RB1. In that sort of build, like you're tacking on 6, 7 running backs. But if you're going with 5, you're probably making this kind of like modified hyper fragile sort of approach where you're like, I'm counting on my first 2 running backs. Maybe you grabbed one in round 1, an elite guy like Brees. Maybe you tacked on someone in round 5 or 6 or something. And those are your bets. And you're saying, I'm going to bet on those scores most weeks, but I'll throw on someone in the Blake Corum range and I'll throw on one of the Dallas running backs and like you'll kind of dip your toes into those waters a little bit. But with 5, this is one where you are making a bet on some of the early ADP guys.
Yeah, my early guys, and by early, it's kind of spread out from like, I've got a Brees, here and there. It's like, but the guys that are showing up more in my exposures are ETN, Pacheco, and James Cook. And I think James Cook was one of the guys I talked about a lot earlier in the shows. But any of those running backs, like in the first couple rounds, you're higher on?
Yeah, Pacheco's been a guy that like initially I'm like, I don't know, I don't really see it, but I've come around just in some of our research and discussions about the Chiefs offense and how much we think they're going to bounce back. The tricky thing is like if you want to build Chiefs stack teams, like they all go in the same range, right? It's like Kelsey at the back of the 3rd, Pacheco's in the 40s, Mahomes is in the 40s, both of his wide receivers are kind of right there too. So it's hard to make those things work, but I just find myself wanting exposure to the Chiefs. And so sometimes I will take Pacheco in that range. Doesn't break the bank ADP wise, but if this offense scores a lot more touchdowns, he's someone I think could definitely beat his ADP.
Yeah, that team that I was talking about earlier, I took 4 wide receivers out to start, and then I took Pacheco. Now, I did have Andrews because I wanted to make sure that I was in your good graces, but he was taken right before, and then Pacheco fell to pick 51. So just scooping up that value, man. I mean...
What is that, like 4 spots?
It was like 6. So
okay, that's fine.
It's not bad. It's not bad.
It's not great. It's not bad either.
Hey, if this team wins, I'll print a t-shirt of this team and I'll circle that value.
Put the team on a t-shirt. Sir, what is that? Don't worry about this, okay? This is how I won $1.5 million.
This is how I spent my June 2024. Next question is from Legendary Jake, who's one of our mods on Discord. It's a good question. What football jerseys do you own, and how many of those are Penix jerseys, Kyle? So if you didn't hear about this after the NFL draft, the Ballers sent me 2 Michael Penix jerseys, one that I got to sign as a giveaway, and I just sent that out. It took over a month to get here, by the way, but it's here. And so I have in my closet a number 9 Penix Jr. jersey. My Falcons jerseys right now are Penix, Kyle Pitts, Julio Jones, which is still my favorite one.
Titans great.
And then I have a Falcons Todd Gurley jersey.
Nice.
You like?
I forgot I played with him.
And then the other ones in my closet right now are there's a fun one, David Carr Texans jersey. So like,
why?
Because the Texans were a expansion franchise, and I just like the colors, and it was like 2001, 2, something like that. I also, my sons found this the other day. I have a LeBron James high school jersey, St. Vincent, St. Mary's. I really like LeBron in high school a lot. And then I have some other random ones. I have a lot of King Griffey stuff too. But my take is jerseys are fun to have. I don't actually like wearing them that much, though.
Yeah, same. I used to be a jersey guy. I truthfully am not now. I
get it.
I've got an AJ Brown one, which I got for Christmas a couple years ago. And like, I'll throw that on if we like have a group over to watch an Eagles game or something. But man, I think I wear a jersey 4 times a year, maybe.
That's me too.
So I'm not a big jersey guy. I've only got one right now.
I was growing up and I thought it was cool. Like I remember having a Deion Sanders one because he was a Brave and a Falcon. So that was pretty cool growing up. And then I had a bunch of other baseball ones that I love. Nomar Garciaparra, my favorite player of all time. But yeah, that's maybe people don't like that take, but I just think in general, people look dumb in jerseys, and my wife definitely thinks people look dumb in jerseys. So yeah, just don't wear them that much. Next question from Saints to Death. What's your views on some of the fringe strategies in best ball, like 4 or 5 tight ends or stopping at 6 wide receivers on a 0 RB team? I'll first say 4 or 5 tight ends. Just don't do it. It's usually not a good strategy. There were some good advance rates or finals rates last year, but those are really skewed based on who the person was in the final of those builds. Like if you had Njoku or something, but in general, they're going to be way lower in your advance rate. So 5 tight ends, no way. 4, I think I could see it.
Yeah, and just for reference, I pulled the numbers over the last 3 years from Underdog. The advance rate for a 5 tight end team is down at 11.3, so falls off a cliff. So I don't think I've ever done it. I experimented a little bit with some of the 4 tight end builds last year when there was a little bit of hype around it. The idea is you just literally punt the position. You take 4, of your last 5 picks maybe or something like that, or 4 of your last 4 picks are all tight ends. But I think the ADP landscape has to make sense for it to work and for you to feel confident in it. In other words, this year, I feel like the elite tight ends are too cheap. Like, I think Mark Andrews should be a 3rd-round player. I think, McBride is fairly priced. I think Kincaid is maybe a little overpriced, but generally fairly priced. Like, Kittle falls sometimes into, like, the 7th round. So I kind of just want to attack that range and that group. So myself, this year specifically, like, when I get to around 16, 17, 18, I'm like, dude, I don't know. Like, maybe Noah Fant bounces back this year. I have no idea, right? There's no one that you're like super confident or excited to click.
Correct.
For me anyway in that range. Whereas last year I felt like there were some guys where I was like, yeah, like I like this profile. Like, I'll take a shot here. So it can work. I mean, any strategy could work in a year, but I think the ADP landscape has to make sense for it. So I don't think I've done any 4 tight end builds this year. And as I mentioned, none of the 5 tight end builds.
And over the last 3 years, I just ran the numbers. 2.8% of all lineups were 4 tight end builds. So it's just very, very small. And really, I think the data is skewed on who were the late tight ends that people took. So if you got Laporta, it's going to skew all those teams. If you got Isaiah Likely. So it's not really, to me, it's not really like you took 4 tight ends and this helped. It was you took the right tight ends and two of the 4 were good. Because let's be honest, like, if you're taking Gesicki, Dulcich, Cade Otton, and
Noah
who's
Fant.
one of the other... And Noah Fant, it could work, but really you need one of those guys to actually like break through. And then on top of that, you need 1 or 2 of them to hit in the playoffs. So I don't think it's really a construction thing. I think it's more of like you just pick the right dude. The other part of the question was stopping at 6 wide receivers on 0 RB teams. And I think that actually is something that we do think can work. If you do 6 or 7 wide receivers and you're just done. We looked at teams that drafted their wide receiver 5 before round 7. So like you just hammered away. You just said, I took 5 wide receivers. Let's say you got Mark Andrews and Lamar, and then you took your other wide receiver. Like those teams crushed. So I'm totally fine with that strategy.
Yeah, advance rates for those teams specifically that took 6 and employed that 5th wide receiver before round 7 over the last 3 years of data. And again, ADP landscapes change, so you need to don't take this as like a hard and fast rule. This is definitely going to work this year. But historically, 6 wide receiver teams with that strategy have a 23% advance rate. That's really, really strong. And those teams crushed in the playoffs as well. Same is true for teams that only took 7 and took 5 of those guys before round 7. So the team that we talked about at the top, I spent my first 5 picks on wide receiver. Like I'm counting on those guys to be my score, every week. I'm going to take some upside shots late and hope that I can hit on kind of a diamond in the rough. But I'm in those builds like fading the dead zone-y type of wide receivers of like Khalil Shakir and kind of like that range of like 120-ish ADP wise, and just saying like I'll take the elites, I'll fade the middle range and like throw some darts at the end. But yeah, I'm planning to make that a 6 or 7 wide receiver team.
I want there to be a list of guys that just like when Betz feels them based on a vibe space only, it's just like, oh god, because they're like the reference that like just kind of comes like, oh, you don't want to be drafting, I don't know, like Jameson Williams.
It's just the name that comes to mind of who I see in the applet in the ADP range. But right now, man, Jameson's, he's not going to be there much longer. I told you last week he's going to be a top 75 player. I've seen him go 78, 79 sometimes this week, so it's coming.
We didn't water bet that, right? It was just more of like a friendly conversation.
Yeah, that was just a conversation. But okay. Greg Dortch. Now that is on the record, my friend.
All right, let's take a quick break because this break is sponsored by...
This episode is brought to you by Etsy. Sound the gifting panic alarm. You need to get an amazing gift. Wait, no, the perfect gift. Relax. Now you can use gift mode on Etsy. Gift mode on Etsy takes the stress out of gifting, so you can find the perfect item for anyone and any occasion. It's easy. Just tap or click gift mode on your Etsy app or Etsy.com. Then answer a few short questions about who you're shopping for and what they like. And gift mode instantly gives you curated gift ideas based on hundreds of personas. Now it's simple to find gifts made by independent sellers for all the people in your life. So whether you need a housewarming gift for the new homeowner or a birthday present for the pickleballer, gift mode has you covered. Need to find the perfect gift? Don't panic. Try gift mode on Etsy now.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
I don't really know what ad you just got. You might not have gotten any, but I always think about that whenever we go to the break and someone's like, what are we going to hear from next? Because our ads are dynamically inserted, and they are great ones, by the way, but I never know who the sponsor is. Like, could be
changes
shout
every
out week. To, people want it to be Chili's, but it definitely could be Counterculture Coffee. They just sent me some coffee, by the way.
When are you going to send them my address?
I can do that.
Please.
I can do that. This is just a free plug. They're not paying me to say this. They're just that awesome, and it's my favorite coffee, Counterculture Coffee.
Use code BORG at checkout for 15% off.
It's Borg for you at to save
Borg's beans.
I do need a Borg's beans promo code. It probably won't work, but we'll try it. Next question is off of X, formerly known as Twitter, from @pgoose87. He said, is there a schedule for when best ball tournaments show up on Underdog? Often, the only ones I see are the more expensive ones. I prefer tournaments under $10. And I'll just say, I get it. I do as well. However, no, you won't get a schedule. It's designed this way. When you open up the app, I did a little screenshot for Betz just to remind us that when you open up the app, they want to create a sense of urgency. And that's why you kind of see the little meter that moves forward that you can see how, what percentage fill. And the cheaper ones fill very quickly. And they want that on purpose. They want that kind of like, it's kind of like when shoe companies like drop a certain shoe and there's a certain amount. It's like everybody rushes in to get it and then they close it. Now, don't forget that for every tournament they're going to have the puppy, there's going to be a puppy 2 and a puppy 3 and a puppy 4 and a puppy Superflex and a slow. And last year I looked like there's a slow puppy. They eventually do a fast puppy. I was looking last year. There's a Poodle 1, Poodle 2, Poodle 3 I was a part of. It's all of them. So just realize that like you're not missing out. I think that's my best advice is like there will be other ones, right? For sure. Yeah. Especially now that best ball is so, it's not as unique. Like 3 years ago, it was kind of unique to play best ball at a high level. Now it's like everyone, is doing that. So contests fill, they wait a couple weeks, they drop another one. So yes, do not feel like you have to enter the ones that are out there right away. Like don't feel like you're going to miss out because there will certainly be other ones as the summer goes on. And they're kind of fun because oftentimes those close, in a 2-ish week period. So like you're drafting against people that all have the same exact information. It's not like a BBM where like the same contest is open from April, May to September, 7th or whatever.
and so much changes where you're like, oh, I have all those dead teams that I didn't know Kyron was the guy you needed, that sort of thing. Like you have these kind of finite little windows. So I think it's kind of fun because the landscape changes a lot. So yeah, don't feel like you have to rush. There's definitely going to be a lot more.
Here's a good follow-up question from Rajan. You both preach bankroll allocation for DFS contests, talking about how much you should put in for cash and tournaments, but not for best ball. How much do you guys allocate for tournaments and then for 3-person, 6-person, 12-person contests? So bankroll is a nuanced conversation because it's really not an apples to apples. Betz and I don't even have an apples to apples. Like, okay, this is what he spends or I spend. Like, we don't say like, this is what we're doing. And we don't tell people because everybody's at different stages and your life circumstances, your job, all that other stuff. So I think about the year with bankroll management as a couple of different seasons. So March through May is when I think NFL draft and early win totals, right? Like that's when we usually put out, these are the ones that you're betting on. And then May through August is best ball. I have some amount for my home leagues and my dynasty leagues. Like, I'm paying that. And then most of mine goes towards DFS. So I don't like to be the person that spends all my money in the summer knowing that I'm going to have to wait 6 months to see if I get any of this money in return. The best part about best ball is that you can set and forget it. The worst part about it is you're spending your money now and it won't feel like real money because it's gone for 6 months. And then when you win it back, this happens all the time for people. They're like, oh, look how good I did. It's like, you actually spent $400 here and you got $120 back. So it was a loss this year. So it's not real money to a lot of people. So I personally do not spend as much as I do with DFS because I get to be so locked in. It's my job. It's what Betz and I talk about. I feel like I have an edge, even more of an edge, and I don't have to wait 6 months. So do you have that same kind of mentality and approach for how much overall bankroll you're allocating?
Yeah, I think this is one it's a good conversation to have. I love the question because, I think a lot of people at best ball, they're like, I'll just deposit again. I'll just keep entering. I'll just keep depositing, like whatever. And then you look back and you're like, at the end of your year, your results, it's so easy to see in DFS because it's a week-to-week thing. You're like, I did well this week or I didn't. I know how much of my money I'm spending or if I can push it a little bit more this year. But in best ball, like you said, you just kind of forget you did it. And then like the year comes and it ends. And sometimes you get a huge payout and things work out well. And like, that's awesome. But the reality is a lot of people are not going to be that way. People are going to lose. It's just kind of how it goes. So I think having a goal and a mindset of like, these are the contests I want to play. These are the contests I want to max enter this year. Here's my bankroll on how to do it is an important kind of conversation to have with yourself and a plan to have with yourself. Because like I just talked about with some of these contests, the puppy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like you're like, I got to max all these. Like, and it feels very overwhelming that you have to do it. But just remember, like on NFL Sunday, you don't play every single contest that is available. You pick your spots. Like for me, I'm a 3-max guy, a single entry type of guy. I'm not going to 150 everything. So I pick my spots. And the same is true with this sort of thing. Like there are contests that I will just let go and I'm not even going to bother entering them. There's ones that I'm like, I like this payout structure, I like this format. I like that it's a single entry instead of, other stuff. So be willing to not feel like you have to play everything that comes out, because if you do that, I think it's really easy to burn through your bankroll.
Yes. So like for instance, the ones that I'm in right now, it's a slow draft, but I maxed out the Hound Dog. It was just 5 max, $6 entry because it fit with where I was at in life. It's like, oh, one, I like that I can just spend $30 and that this tournament is just for the beginning of June when I can devote my time after the ultimate draft kit to this and to building these teams. Like it was very easy for my season of life. Now I look at some of these other tournaments that people are in, like at this point there's like 30 different dog names. I can't even like I don't know which one is which anymore because there's so many. But I don't feel bad missing out on a tournament. I do like the puppies. Those are great ones and that I can also time box. And then a follow-up question from a couple of different people from Discord is about Best Ball Mania. And what do I do if I don't want to max enter? Because yeah, you're probably not a person that says, I'm going to be able to max enter 150 at $25 a pop and I'm going to stream them. Like there are certain people that can do that. Shout out to Peter Overzet and, other people that are like really good at this. And this is what their content is. Like my content is a bunch of different stuff for the footballers, not just best ball. But yeah, so what do you do, Betz, if you're not going to max enter? Because I don't max enter and I know you don't either.
Yeah, I think, this is one that I think it's tough to answer because some people are okay with the I'll throw a few bullets and I'll just kind of hope that maybe one of them hits. But we've talked about that in DFS landscapes too. If I'm entering a contest that I know other people are definitely going to max enter, think about a $10, $20 one on DraftKings on a Sunday, and you're like, I'm only going to throw 4 or 5 bullets at this and let's just see what happens. Usually that's not a positive EV move. Now, Best Ball Mania is super fun. It's really, really fun to be like, I could win $1 million. Sweet. Yeah, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to throw 20 of these in there and kind of hope for the best, or 25 is generally what I do. But I know that that's not what I'm relying on for my success in DFS or best ball, even reality. There are other contests that I feel like I have a better edge in, and I will max those. So just make sure that you know kind of where your edge exists, and don't feel like you need to, like I said, spread yourself too thin of just throwing a few darts here, a few darts there. Pick and choose your spots and have a plan in place.
We talk all the time about people's goals with DFS and betting and best ball. It's you get to set that. Don't determine that based on what other people tell you need to do. If this is just a fun thing you do with your friends, that's awesome. It's fun. It's valuable to you. I tell my wife all the time, my main home league and the entry fees that I have for that, it's not super expensive. It's the one I've been playing since college. It's $150. It's not a lot. But for 5 months worth of entertainment, $150 is cheap. It really is, in this day and age. And so you can think about it that with best ball. Obviously, you'd like to win. We like to coach you and teach you and give you resources to be able to do that. But it depends on your goals and what you want to do. But if you want to take this seriously and you're saying, I want to manage my bankroll, I'd like to come out, positive in my bankroll, then we would stick to more of that small entry field stuff that Betz is talking about. Find a 5 max, find one that's 3 max. And then for cash games, Jason likes cash games a lot. And by cash and best ball, it's the 12 person you're entering in, it's a $10 entry and you're just playing against those people. That is really fun. I tend to say I do that for fun. I'm not doing that to build a bankroll. I do it to draft with people, to just say I want to get in, and that's just how I approach it. I'm not looking at it as I'm playing a massive volume so that I can beat up people. Now in DFS, I want to bully people in the lobby. That's what I want to do. But in best ball, it's different.
Yeah, I feel the same. Same approach in DFS. We talk about cash a lot on this show, but I think about best ball and I think about, I was drafting a ton of the big board, before the NFL draft, because Kyle and I are for our jobs, we're researching these prospects. I felt like I had somewhat of a decent edge of these guys probably have draft capital, these guys don't. And of course you're going to be wrong on so many things. But when I think about how hard it is to be good at best ball, there's so much chaos that's going to happen that we can't even wrap our heads around the idea of this could happen in the NFL season. It's going to happen. Whatever, the wildest things happen, right? So it's so hard to get that right that I almost just say it's so challenging just overall that I'm going to let the variance be what it is, and I'm going to play tournaments. So I don't really play a ton of cash games for best ball, and that's fine for kind of me and how I operate with my bankroll. But if you think you have an edge in cash games and there's enough action, go for it. I think that's a great thing to do.
All right, a couple more questions here. This is kind of a follow-up one as well from Alex. How does your strategy change when doing non-tournament drafts? Do you prefer draft rookies? Is there anything structurally that you change? And my first response is not really. I'm still trying to do the same thing, which is roster construction. I'm looking at our rankings in the app and I'm kind of sorting through and seeing okay, here's where we're ahead of consensus. Here's where I see ADP. I'm stacking. So yeah, I don't really change my approach to that. Maybe the final 2 or 3 rounds, I think about them a little bit differently. Because I'm not trying to be perfect, but yeah, I'm just trying to be better than 11 other people in the room.
For sure. Yeah, I think a lot of the same stuff applies. The only thing that I would say that I'm not even thinking about in those kind of things is the week 17, week 16 game stacks. Doesn't even cross my mind, in those situations. Otherwise, it's mostly the same game to me.
Next question off of Discord is from PMA Yankees, a general best ball question. Is there any data on playoff advance rates of people who did fast versus slow drafts? Fast drafts probably have more mistakes and suboptimal auto drafts. I sort of wonder if your stacks are more likely to get sniped in a fast draft, but there's nothing like a fast draft on a summer weekend afternoon. I know you can appreciate that last point, Betz, but there is some data out there. You are more of a fast draft person. I am more of a slow draft person, but I will obviously do my fast draft when I have the time. It's just I don't do fast drafts in the middle of the day. Like I just, with like our schedule and footballers and stuff, it's hard for me to just say like, I'm committing to doing this because I feel like I'm going to get pulled in like 3 different directions with footballers, like for the main show or something else. So it stresses me out to do a fast draft in the middle of the day. You're more fast.
Well, I was before these two gremlins in my life, these children. I mean, imagine like the thought process of trying to like focus on teams and stacks while someone's like, "Daddy, get my milk," or whatever. Or someone pooped and I got to change their diaper. It's like I can't focus right now. So like with kids, it's almost impossible. I think unless for me, it is actually like, okay, I did this project for work. I have 30 minutes. Like I actually can just like focus. I'll do one.
Correct.
But for the most part, I've done a lot more slow drafts recently, just because of life. But I think there's a little bit more of an edge still in fast drafts. I think I'm personally like a better fast drafter. With slow, sometimes I'll get stuck where I'm in like 10, 15. And I know people that are in like 50 at once. And it's like, I can't even like fathom trying to wrap my head around which team I have and what stacks I'm going for. And then by the time you get on the clock, 10 minutes have passed and you're like, I don't really know what my strategy was when I started this team. And so like things just go sideways, and that is a struggle for me. I do think, anecdotally, I've seen a little bit more dead teams when I've done fast drafts of like, oh man, this guy, picked a guy, or he got sniped and he just reached 4 rounds for his quarterback because he didn't want to miss out. So like I'll see that stuff in my fast drafts. And I think there's been a little bit of data on this in the industry, but I don't think it's been a widely studied topic, so to speak.
Yeah, one of my go-tos, and hopefully you do follow him, Michael Leone of Establish the Run. If ever there's like a fringe topic like this that I can't really get my head around, what does this mean, or how do I figure this out? Usually Michael Leone has a thought on it or has done some research. So he's at 2 hats, 1 mic for Establish the Run, but he did find some data looking at fast versus slow drafts, and he agrees with you. Fast drafts are easier. There's more people to face dead teams, and by dead teams, their advance rate goes down to like 5%. But overall, it's pretty small. Like it's because each room is different, right? Like you are drafting with, the dummies that are saying, I got to draft Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, and those are all my picks. Like, cool. That's happening in your room. That's not happening in my room at all. Like I'm with the sharp people, the smart people over here. So it's like, it is funny though. Like every single draft is so different, where like you look up sometimes you're like, gosh, like nothing went right in this room because I felt like people were doing what they were supposed to do. And the next one you're like, that team sucks. That team's dead. That team's already drafted 7 running backs and we're in round 10.
Yeah. That will happen more in fast drafts, I think.
Yeah. So it's different. All right, let's finish with this question. I think this is a good one to land on. It's about the running backs. Would you ever draft both running backs in an ambiguous backfield to be unique? So last year, I mentioned Achane and Mostert. Is there any value in considering not only player exposure, but stacked exposure in week 17? So I'll just say, week 17 for both running backs, that's way too far down the line to think like I'm drafting them because of that. If anything, you're getting the ping pong approach that Betz, you talked about last week. It's like, yes, maybe it was an Achane week in week 16, and you get Mostert in 17, and you have a unique build, but you got to make it all the way there. So I'm not even like considering that. If it works out, awesome, but you didn't control that. So for you, are you thinking about drafting a backfield, like the whole backfield together?
Yeah, I think it is viable. And, last year is the perfect example of that, right? With like Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane, they went super late. Achane closed, I think, around 120 for his ADP. Mostert was around 150. So those guys were just so cheap that you can make it work. I think about this, and that's probably the best example we're going to see in a very, very long time of like those two guys together were so good for you. But in general, the way that it works, and I'm not talking about injury specifically, but the way that both guys hit for you is they have to be cheap enough, right? Like if you're taking one of the running backs in the first 3, 4, 5 rounds, you're counting on them to give you a difference-making season. If you take Breece Hall in round 1, like sure, you can tack on Braylon Allen, and maybe you say in week 17, Hall got hurt in week 16, and so Allen's the guy in week 17. Like you said, it's just a very thin needle to thread. If you're taking Allen and Hall, I want Braylon Allen not to be hitting my lineup, right? Like I need Breece Hall to have a truly incredible season. But if you get late in the draft and you've got like the Titans backfield or the Cowboys backfield or the Chargers where like no one knows what to do with them, and you take a couple of guys and they both are good enough to outperform their ADP, or they kind of ping pong spike weeks, like you said, these guys can have standalone value and have contingent upside as well on top of that. So for me, it's mostly just the cost, conversation of where are these guys going in the draft. And if they're early, I'm not going to do that approach. But if they're ambiguous and they're later, then it certainly can work. And we saw it last year.
Yeah, you want backfields that have two guys that are preferably going round, 10 or later, that you're looking at them and saying, okay, the field doesn't really know, but there is a clear order. So like with the Chargers, Gus Edwards is going at the top. I saw just some injury thing today, so Gus Edwards is going to have a Q tag on DraftKings if everybody wants to make sure they add that. But it's like Edwards, Dobbins, Kamani Vidal. If you want to get two of those pieces and just say, I know they're going to run the ball. I know this is the Greg Roman approach. And the stat that I dug up was his running back rooms have averaged 13.7 rushing touchdowns together in his 10 years OC. So like if you knew you were getting 14 touchdowns from Gus Edwards and a round, what round is Vidal out now? Like 15, 16?
Probably like 12 by now, honestly. I mean, it's honestly been a while since I've clicked him because he's screaming up draft boards. But I think around like 15 or so.
Yeah, so like that could work because you're not allocating what you were, all your resources in round 2, 3, or 4 where you're saying this has to hit. You used to be able to do this last year with Detroit too, right? Like Gibbs and Montgomery. This year, Gibbs is that round 1 pick where it's like, oh man, that could work if the Lions have 20 rushing touchdowns or something, but that one feels a little steep for me to get in on the backfield. I mean, I love Montgomery. We both have him a lot of places. What do you think about Cincinnati, where, Zach Moss seems to be the lead guy? He's going to be running out of shotgun, which is very what Joe Mixon did. Chase Brown had one play last year. People are going to say he's explosive. He had one play where he got loose and was like wide open and went for like a 60-yard reception. Other than that, he did nothing else. It skews all of his numbers. So I took Chase Brown for my Bengals team earlier, but it's like, I don't know if he's a thing. Would you take both of those guys?
I think you could. They're cheap enough that, they don't have to be incredible picks to pay it off. And like I said, you can kind of have some ping pong weeks. If you're taking, a Joe Burrow team and you want to throw one of those running backs on, like you did, I think it makes a lot of sense. But if you're not able to get other Bengals and you think the Bengals are going to have a great year this year, maybe you just soak up some of the production to the running backs. So yeah, I think that's definitely viable. I think it's viable with some of the Washington guys. Like I don't love Eckler, but like, what if they outperform expectation? Both those guys can pay it off. I think it's gross, but I think it's viable with the Giants.
No.
Like Singletary and Tyrone Tracy, maybe. Or Eric Gray, I don't even know who it is at this point. Maybe that's a bad example. But the other one that I was thinking about when I was just talking is the Broncos, right? Like right now, there's a little bit of like mild whispers of like, does Javonte even make this team? Which would be, I would be floored if he doesn't make the team, but it's possible. But assuming Javonte does make the team and you want to throw Jill McLaughlin on there, he was super explosive as a pass catcher. Sean Payton's going to use this running back room. He always does. So like that's another one where I could see that working because those guys are so cheap that it could pay it off. So the bottom line is like this can work as long as it's cost effective.
Yeah, the Giants were a team that I was like, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I see these Tyrone Tracy is running with the ones right now. And they're going to use him as a passing downs back. Like, okay, this is I know we're at the end of the podcast. Whenever you see a headline right now that says this team is running with the ones, ask yourself the question, who else is on the field? So like, there was some news out in like Cincinnati and it's like, well, yeah, Chase and Higgins aren't on the field. Of course they're running with the ones. There's literally no one else out here right now running around in shorts. So so the Giants are one, and then the Patriots, I might be taking an L on Gibson, but I'm not drafting both running backs on a team that projects this bad. Gibson was just cheap enough, and I think he has pass catching skills. He's gotten like 40 receptions every year. It's like, I want that, and I want to know that I can have that in the round 16, 17, but I'm not taking that Patriots backfield that projects to be, the lowest scoring team in the league, right?
Yeah, fair.
Okay, good. Well, I think we're on the same page here, but man, you betting on Singletary and Tracy? Big
What if it's
Giants
what you
guy?
need, dude? What if that's what you need this year? No, I was mostly just pointing that out as an example of they fit the ADP landscape of like,
late.
In theory, this could work, but like, do I really want to put two pieces into that Giants backfield? Not really. So I probably won't be doing that specific example, but based off ADP, in theory, it could work.
Okay, let's pin this for another episode where you and I will just get to give some galaxy brain like wild thoughts at the very end. It's like, this is what you need. Or we can find some online for best ball and not say the names and not try to like out anybody, but just be like, here's the wildest theories I've seen. It's like, you need, I don't know, Tyrone Tracy to win your best ball league or something.
That'd be a fun conversation. Are you taking Tyrone Tracy?
No, he's going to bury me, isn't he?
I've taken him a little bit, but there was some talk about Eric Gray potentially as the RB2. I don't really know. He's kind of a wait and see.
What if I told you that Tyrone Tracy is approaching 25?
I would feel less great about that.
Yeah, and then someone's going to say out there like, oh, but you know that he was a wide receiver in college and he's just learning the running back position. Guys, if you're this old and you're drafted this late in the NFL, it's a good chance that you're probably not going to make it, just looking at history. But what do I know? I'm just talking to you about fake football. Next week, just to give one more tease, we're going to be doing a live best ball draft. So if you're one of those people that want to draft with us, we're going to draft with our Ballers Discord crew, our best ball crew. We're going to put out the link in there. So make sure you jump in on that and get to be part of live draft bets. Tell everyone goodbye.
Yes. Hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. I mean, this summer, dude. Best ball summer it's great. It's been going great so far. Hopefully you're enjoying all the content, the rankings, the primer, all that stuff in the UDK. Enjoy your best ball drafts this weekend. Maybe don't take two Giants. And good luck. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at thefantasyfootballers.com.